Hello, Mr. Foley here. So we are on part D, mapping basics of the basics unit 1. And it's just a real simple section looking at a lot of things that you learn at a young age and then talking about, different types of maps we're going to see in our class. So, we're on the Google Classroom, classwork, go down to notes. We're going to be down to the mapping basics section D here, and you'll just fill some of these notes in as we go along. When we get to the maps, just fill in some of your ideas for how you might use these types of maps and who might use these type of maps as we go along here. So here we go. Should be pretty quick. Okay, so when we talk about maps, we obviously need to talk directions. All right, so we start out with our most basic directions, which are cardinal directions. Okay, and we have our compass rose for that. And each map normally has a compass rose. And, there's your note you can fill in there, right there. It shows you directions on a map, which is very important so you know which way is which. Okay, so I have it circled on this map. It's the same as this right here. And so if you're looking at this map and saying, okay, which state is directly south of Minnesota, you can look, well, south's that way. And there you go. Sometimes kids get a little confused on maps trying to figure out north and west and that kind of thing. This helps you out with that. Also, what I talk about as well is when you're looking at longitude, for example, here. So one of these, I can't see them real well. One of them says 100, 110, 120, whatever. But if you see that this one says 100, let's say, okay, I think that's 90. Here's 100, I think. If this is 110 and this is 120, it's getting bigger as you go this direction. Okay, so if it's getting bigger this direction, wait, actually, this direction, all right, I got a point different on your map. So as we see it goes this way, it's getting bigger. That means these are degrees west. If the numbers get bigger going this way, it's degrees east. If the numbers get bigger going up, it's degrees north. If the numbers get bigger going south, it degrees south. And so you have all those things pretty easy to work with. That's compass rose. Now, our four main directions are our cardinal directions: north, east, south, and west. Fill those in. There's not much else I need to say. Our intermediate directions will be in between those. And so we're looking at northeast, southeast, southwest, northwest. And there's kind of the abbreviations you'll see in a map a lot of times for them. Now, most maps will have a legend or a key. And here's your note for that section. It identifies what symbols mean on a map. So you may have a pretty basic one. Maybe if you're at a state park or a county park, you have something like this. They'll have these little symbols that tells you what to look for, okay? If you're looking at a highway map, maybe you see different things like this, and it tells you how big the cities are based on their circle. The colors tell you what kind of roads there are. Over here, we have a population density map, and the legend is telling you what the colors mean. Actually, it's not population density. Ooh, this is economic, actually. And so how much money do people make in different areas? And you can see the darker the color, the more money they make. Same as over here, the bigger the circle, the more people there are. So map legend just really helps you to understand and read the map itself. Map grids. Map grids are great, really important for being able to understand the map. So when we look at world maps, we use longitude and latitude as a map grid to figure out where a city might be. So St. Petersburg here, we look at 30 east and 60 north, and we can figure out where it is. And we tell other people too. That's how GPS is, right? And so these are not real lines. It's not like you can walk over top of the 30 east line. They don't exist physically in the world, but we do know, like, we have this grid that we've made to make it easier to understand the world. Sometimes you'll see a different type of map grid like this. It'll have numbers and letters. Sometimes you have that on road maps, for example. And so, excuse me, a little yawn here. So this is a park map, for example. And it's like, hey, you want to see the lines? Okay, well, you go to section C3, and then you can find it a little easier. Kind of like Battleship, right? To figure out the location. And so map grids are really good to figure out where things are. Otherwise, it's like, hey, where are the lines? Well, they're north of the zebras and, southeast of the large mammals. That's okay, but it's much better if I can just say C3. It's much better if I can tell you St. Petersburg is here instead of saying, well, you know, it's kind of by Istanbul and London, which it's not actually. So map grids are wonderful. Okay, so we're gonna look at the main types of maps. I'll have the definition on your sheet for your notes. You just have to tell me what do you think are the uses for these types of maps. So the first type of map is a political map. It shows the boundaries of nations, states, different locations, things like that. We will use political maps all the time, and the use is very simple, right? You can figure out where countries are, cities are, how close they are, how far apart they are. You can see like which, in World War II, for example, we'll look at political maps to show the Allied forces versus the Axis forces. When we look at the European Union, we'll look at maps to see which countries in Europe are part of the European Union or not. So a lot of different uses there for political. Our next type, let me move myself here a little bit, is physical, okay? And these show you a lot of physical features of the Earth, such as mountains, lakes, all those kind of things. A lot of times you can see elevation and those things as well. And so what would be the use? Well, you know, the use is simple. It's what can we find on the Earth for physical features? You know, if I want to go skiing, am I going to go to an area over here? Probably not. There's not a whole lot of mountains there, right? But maybe I'm going to look in this area because you have a lot more mountains, things like that. So it's used for those purposes. I know physical maps are used a lot for different people. For example, if you're a hunter, you're going to use a physical map to figure out, you know, the type of terrain that the animal you're looking for would probably work in and live in. If you're a fisherman, you're going to use physical maps when you use depth finders, right? To figure out what does the bottom look like, how deep is this, things like that. So physical maps are great in a lot of different ways. Our third type are climate maps, and they show all the climate zones in an area. So this is a world climate map, but you could also look at a US one or a Wisconsin one and see what climates are like in different areas. So what is the use of this? Well, it's to get an understanding of, you know, why certain areas are similar. Okay, for example, we talk about a lot of people, a lot of the Irish right here came to the United States to farm. Same with Norway and Sweden. Well, why did they come to our area? Well, we see similar climates in those areas, right? Why do we see that there's not winter time like we know it in Mexico and in the Central American area? Well, they have a tropical climate, right? If you know what tropical climate means, it means that there's not snow, things like that. And so the use is really being able to understand how areas are similar and different and how weather plays a part in that. Your next type is a vegetation map, and it will show you what kind of, you know, environments do we have in different areas for things that grow there. So if you look at this one of the United States and Canada, it's very useful to understand, okay, what do we have where, right? If you look at this part, temperate grassland, you know that these are the grassland areas. Over here, desert scrubs. Like, why is it desert scrub? Well, you have a lot of mountains in that area. If we go back to this, we know that you have a more subtropical climate, and that's going to make it that way. Whereas up here, we know there's a lot of forests, not a lot of humans up there because of the climate being colder. And then way on the top, you see the tundra, not much growing there because we know by the climate map that it's really cold. So vegetation maps are very useful to understand what can grow in different areas. Sometimes that will be used for farming to figure out, okay, where can we try to grow these crops and different things like that. It's also good for understanding animals and their migrations. They're obviously going to go to certain areas that have certain vegetation. And the last two maps, sorry, population density, our second to last one. And this shows how many people live within certain areas. For example, here's our Wisconsin map, and it's telling you per square mile, how many people can you find. So in these regions per square mile, there may be 1 or 1 to 10 people, which is not many. Whereas if you get down to Milwaukee, per square mile, there might be 5,000. So 5,000 in a chunk, 1 person in a chunk, very different. And the use is just to help you to understand where people live and how many people live in different areas. It's really good when you look at the United States, figure out cities. It's also good for urban planners when they're trying to figure out, okay, where do we need more transportation systems? Where do we need more roads? What would be good for a subway system? Businesses use population density maps all the time to figure out, okay, we want to have, McDonald's for every 10,000 people. Well, if you know how dense the population is and where people work, you can figure out, okay, where are good locations for these. So a lot of uses for businesses, for individuals studying, for governments, all kinds of different things. And the last one is the economic and land use map. It shows you two things. Usually it'll show you the resources that are available, and also shows you the ways that resources are typically used. Great maps to understand different countries and how they're gaining money, how they're getting resources, things like that. And so if you look at the United States in this map, you can tell a few things here, okay? So down in the south here, we have petroleum oil. And so obviously that's important to that area. Whereas over here, we have a lot more mining. Okay, you have a lot of mining near the Appalachian Mountains, which makes sense. So a lot of different things like that. This yellow part is mainly commercial farming, and we have a lot of our corn and wheat and other things grown there, which makes sense. Nomadic herding over here, you have cattle moving through, and that's partially because of the temperatures, it's partially because of the mountains and things like that. And so you can really understand where resources are, how to use them with economic and land use maps. Obviously, companies use these as well when they're figuring out where to mine. They'll take a map like this where we've seen mining in the past. They'll pair that with, physical maps and different things like that to kind of get a feel for how the land works and what's there. So these are your types of maps. We'll use them a lot, and you'll see some exercises coming up where we'll use them. So that's what I got. If you have questions, feel free to send me an email. Have a good day. Take care.